Welcome to the last overview of Scrutiny Performance panel of this municipal year. I don't intend to read the full script out because you've heard it many times before this year. Just to say, if the technology fails, then we'll adjourn the meeting for a few minutes to try and resolve the issue, or if this is not possible, a new date and time will be organised. Please can everyone ensure their phones are turned off to silent. So, apologies, Matthew.
We have apologies from Councillor Roy Lees.
Right. We heard from Councillor Burry.
I haven't, no.
No. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go on to the minutes then of the last meeting, which was held on the Thursday, the 13th of January. Is it a true record of that meeting? Thank you.
I'll second them, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. All happy with the minutes? Any comments to make about them? If not, we'll move on to item 2, which is declarations of any interest. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any pecuniary interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda. No? Okay. We'll move on to item 3 then, which is the performance focus, commercial and property. So, Peter, are you going to present the report? Or is Alistair going to present the report? Right, okay.
On my miniature. I can't get on my documents at the minute for some reason. Don't know what it's doing.
Do you want to use my iPad, Alistair?
No, it's coming to life. Give me a minute. What it's doing here. No, it's not playing with me.
Has the technology failed?
It has indeed. The document, as it says, Chair, is as it describes this, is looking at the monitoring of the entire performance on the directorate. The directorate is in 4 bits, as it says in paragraph 6. So that's development, property, markets and town centre and accommodation. The property is a mix of business and housing property, and Peter Gavitt will pick up some of the housing property items because obviously they come under him. I think it says in the overview in paragraph 8 the directorate is performing well, with nearly 6% of the commercial and property indicators performing above target for quarter 3. There are 45 different projects, and it details how many of those are rated green, amber and red. 81% are actually green. So and it also details on paragraph 9, Chair, the fact that the actual budget is slightly overspending, but that's because as it says in item 10 is the biggest is staffing, and this supports income generation. So as it supports income generation, it actually can vary quite, drastically from year to year and from the original budgets, because there's certain elements that, if you like, are opportunistic, and certain elements that are very difficult to forecast because they are a reaction to the commercial world. The individual budget, as it says in paragraph 11, is reduced by £23,000 due to transfer of staffing budgets from Primrose Gardens Retirement Living, which Peter, I'm sure, can talk about. So it's 164,000 more. That doesn't particularly concern me, because, like I said, it's in some departments, budgetary control is all about saving money. In this directorate, some of it's about making money. If you look at the different projects and indicators, so from paragraph 17, you've got the property indicators, focusing on those areas that are red. Reactive repair jobs inspected post-work completion has been lower than the target. That's primarily as a result of some of the changes in staffing. We didn't have our surveyors, we had gaps in the structure, and additional surveyors have now been recruited, which means we can get more of those reactive repair jobs done. Issuing of letters to residents about housing valuations and also about purchasing freehold. Through COVID, we've seen a large number of people asking for those, because, for want of a better word, they've not had a lot else to do. They've had money spare, and they've been looking at rationalising the properties and their arrangements. So they've been asking questions about those kind of things. Again, we've had certain vacancies. Those really are legal letters as opposed to administration letters. So they do tend to get bogged down a bit with our estates and legal team. And then the other one is the voids on commercial sites, which excludes Market Walk and the market. And that is obviously worse than forecast. It's 14.7. But again, we're all aware, and we've had numerous debates about the fact that COVID has affected retail, town centres, and that amount is actually reducing back towards the target of 7.5, which previously was at 5.55, and therefore, given we are seeing some long-term empty units coming back into the market, such as the Greenwoods unit and all the rest of it, I think we are actually going to be looking to exceed that target reasonably quickly. The only issue we've got is a couple of larger buildings on Market Street, the old Argos building and the catalogue shop that are still empty. But again, if they can get away, some of that's attributable to the rental that we don't control, because it's put on by private landlords who try to get too much money, in my opinion, for town centre premises, because there's just not the market for them that there was. The digital office park, again, it details in paragraph 19 about the percentage of rent being collected. Again, that's improving, because when the digital office park, when COVID hit, a lot of the people there moved out or moved away, and we are still looking to collect arrears, but obviously we're trying to do that, as we said at the last council meeting, in a more conciliatory manner, because we appreciate that people's businesses have been fairly badly affected through the last 2 years. I'm happy to take questions as we go along, Chair, or I can keep going. It's up to yourself. The other indicators are around town centre vacancy rate. The target there is 8%. We're at 11.2, which relates back to the item that we just discussed. Community centres occupancy rate, again, that's been affected by COVID. We're at 44.18%. The target is 51%. That is worse. We need to get that better. So bigger is better on this. We need to be starting to get that back up to what it was before at 60%. And that, again, a lot of classes got cancelled through COVID, and they are getting restarted. And obviously there's been a bit of a dislocation of that market over the last few months and the last couple of years, really, because some groups have not reactivated fully still, depending on the people who are attending. Rent collected at the covered market is worse than it was, and is certainly worse than target. Again, we are giving people time to pay, and we are giving people time to recover, and those arrears are being chased, as it says further down. The one that is the response rate for CCTV requests within 5 days is worse, although the previous performance was still. And again, there's there's no single reason for that. It's a mixture of things in different locations. So there are many and varied reasons why that figure is slightly out of kilter, but it's only slightly out of kilter. There is some information about the town centre vacancy rates and about the footfall, which we are starting to see footfall coming back, but it has changed through COVID-19, and therefore it's expected that it'll probably remain below target for a period yet. Voids in the covered market are detailed there, although actually most of those are now resolved because there has been further movement since this report was written, and actually there aren't any voids in the covered market now, other than ones we're deliberately creating ourselves to move people around. So they are temporary voids while we shift people between units. So they've all been filled or are to be filled once we've got the people moved. Again, it advises about the collection of rents and rents in Market Walk, which again we see a little bit of an issue with. And again, Market Walk has a couple of empty units, but there is interest on them, particularly since we've seen the arrival of Luciano's restaurant just after Christmas. That's bringing back more interest. And actually, again, we've got units that are under offer or under refurbishment, and actually people are still paying rent on them, even though they may be empty. It also documents in paragraph 26 about coach visits, again, which went down while COVID was going on and are starting to come back, both in shopping coach visits and some may consider, unfortunately, the return of football coaches as well. Different issue, different problems. Happy to hand over to Peter to go through the accommodation item, if that suits him, and yourself, Chair.
I had a question further on house plans. Basically, I don't know if it's easy to do them at this point.
It's an actual break, isn't it? Go on.
Yeah. Thank you. I have a couple of questions, really. One was, I was trying to understand the correlation between the comment in, I think it's paragraph 12, where you're talking about the overspending. It says the overspend has been generated, and one of the reasons it lists is to a reduction in car park income. But then when you look at the table at the bottom of page 11, the very last line, it seems to indicate that we've exceeded the target, performance exceeded the target on combined car park ticket sales. So am I not understanding that correctly, or do those two things seem to be in contradiction?
I think yes. Two things, one there. One is obviously we gave a period free before Christmas because we could afford to, and it was the right thing to do as part of the COVID bounce back. That'll be one of the reasons for that. So even though we've hit our targets, the numbers haven't come in quite as much as they would. And some of it is because some of the money for across the road came out of that budget, I think, out of car parks budget as opposed to the town centre public realm budget. So there's a mishmash of different monies.
Okay.
I might be wrong, and Mark can correct me.
No, that sounds about right. Thank you. And just one more question. A bit of a general one. I agree with a lot of what Councillor Bradley says about the economy recovering, about the impact on the town centre and how things are moving. And it kind of led me to, there's a number of that red triangles, but some obviously I think concern me more than others, and they also underpinned a lot of the council finances. You know, the rent collection, the voids, the vacancy rates across the 2 or 3 areas. So given that things are moving so much, is it possible we could maybe have this report back in 6 months' time as opposed to the usual year? Because maybe usually an annual monitoring on this kind of thing in a normal circumstance, you know, would be appropriate. But if in times of change, I wouldn't want to go a year and find the things that Councillor Bradley is saying haven't played out as we hoped, and we've missed the opportunity to do things.
Through you, Chair, Mark will be delighted to do it again in 6 months' time. Sorry, Mark. And Conrad.
On the question of rents, how long do you give people to pay, or when they say they finally can't pay, do you give them notice, or?
Yeah, yes, but you'll be aware, Councillor Walker, that when we did this fair collection of monies report to the council that came last time, the idea is to shift away from enforcement in a very abrupt and harsh and also in a sort of dictated manner, so that we have got more flexibility now. we look at the individual business, we look at their situation, because different businesses have been affected differently, particularly through COVID. So some of the personal service businesses, by the very nature, have found it more difficult to keep on trading because they have to be in close proximity to people, so hairdressers, nail bars, etc., have been particularly suffering. So we took a view that as long as we thought we would get the money back, we would not enforce. But that's very much an opinion of the officers and members and history, that we know there are operators in our town centre who quite often take grants to do premises up and then at some point don't pay the rent and don't pay because the business model doesn't work. There are other people who, to be quite blunt, through no fault of their own, need time to pay, and I think there's a judgment call to be made there. So there are guidance notes. It should be over 3 months arrears and then 6 month arrears, but it's very much around health checking on the business. So and the preferred way is that we actually understand why they've got that debt and what other demands they've got on them, and we tend to give people, I would say, probably more benefit than, and therefore occasionally we lose out as a council. But the risk of not doing the opposite is that you enforce too quick on people and you drive people out of business, which has no benefit to us, because you're just creating, you're going to create churn in your town centre. So it's about, as we said at the last meeting, it's about being fair to people and also understanding those businesses, and therefore there are some habitual offenders that we tend to be less understanding and patient with based on experience than others, and therefore most people will get at least a couple of chances, but some people have already had many chances, and therefore that we know them, we know those people, and we know the operators in town centre. And again, if they come to us and can show us, and the one good thing about COVID, I suppose, from Mark's team and from, it's now Jonathan Node's team, a lot of the businesses have had to give us their books to claim the grant money. So we can go back and look at where they are, what they're paying in rents, what they're paying in this, that and the other, and actually say to them, look, your business model isn't sustainable, therefore you can't be racking up more debt to us. What you need to be doing is going and having a word with your landlord and saying, get your rent down because this business is not sustainable as it is. And that has been quite useful, I think, Mark, to us over the last couple of years to understand how, personally, I think it's very scary how much rent some people are paying, mainly to national landlords. And again, if I talk to local landlords, they appear to be accepting that there's a lower rental model that pays over a longer period as opposed to a quick book. I was just having that very conversation last week with somebody who has a number of properties in the town centre who said this model works at this price. If they're paying more than that, they will not last as businesses, or if they are, they're doing something that's not quite right.
And you say people are quite happy to show their books to say, look.
I didn't say they were happy. I said they had to, because they were asking the government for money, and therefore they had to show that they had the wherewithal to pay it back, or a model that would do that. We did get some interesting books. Some businesses were quite vague, you know, how they were operating their business on the information that they had. You know what I mean? It was almost a carrier bag full of paper. But that's how they operate their business. But you know what I mean? It's and again, that helped us identify perhaps some business support we can do to encourage people to have a slightly better modus operandi. But yeah, some interesting applications for grant monies across the town centre, across the town.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions of Alistair? Peter, can you go on to the commercial side?
Of course, can, Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, much with Alistair's, most things in the accommodation are positive, trending upwards. I mean, we've got the quite a lot of efficient use of assets there, with obviously the voids at Primrose and the voids at Cotswold House are lower. I do note on the report, I think for the percentage voids at Primrose Gardens, it says worse than Q3, but I think that's just a typo on the report. It's better than Q3. And then for mainly the ones where we are worse than target, just to highlight them, obviously is the percentage of rent collected at Cotswold housing, which the explains in paragraph 27, is simply just some delays in receiving payments from the housing benefit. And the idea is over time, and especially for Q4, that should balance itself out. going down to the Cotswold conference facilities. They've been closed and not been used due to COVID mainly. And then we've expanded into the room a little bit to help with the Winter Watch service, which was to ensure that people weren't sleeping on the streets, and it was part of the government's wider Everybody In scheme. But we would expect that to improve going forwards. I know, I think Lorraine has contacted previously booked the conference facilities and contacted them to let them know. And then the Primrose conference facilities, obviously are lower than the target, but better than Q3 of the last year. Again, similar to Cotswold, they were closed for a time, and then as they've opened, I think obviously the residents of Primrose are a bit older and a bit more vulnerable in regards to COVID, so I think they're a bit more cautious to returning. But the same, we expect those to increase as time goes on, and obviously things settle down, because it's still quite raw, I think, with COVID restrictions only fully going not so long ago. And then, yeah, I think mostly there you can see the trends are better than targets or improving on the previous year. And happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you for that. Any questions? Yeah.
Just a couple. I was going to congratulate Peter on the fact he's got a lot more green triangles than Alistair, but I'll resist that temptation. Only a couple of small questions for me. Looking at the voids percent at Primrose Gardens, I think the performance is excellent, but I think the target needs to be a lot more realistic, because we all know the demand for that building is short of any turnover period between tenancies. I would expect that target to be a bit lower, so maybe we could review a couple of those to be a bit more realistic. I mean, I don't think it's not going to change your outcome, but I don't think 20% is. I don't think the business model will stack up at 20%. I would imagine. It's all right. Don't worry about it, Mark. It was just.
Right. I think that performance target is based on the business model, actually.
Really?
Yeah. And you're quite right. It probably at the time we didn't know, so
Yeah.
so it was a best guess. The thing that influences the void rate the most, as you rightly said, is because there's such demand for the units, is the turnaround time. Unfortunately, sometimes that's outside of our control, because generally circumstances in which a unit becomes available is generally because someone's passed away, unfortunately. So sometimes it's linked to how long it takes to get someone's affairs in order before we can let it. So yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you in terms of the target. It is one of those things that there's a lot of things outside of our control in terms of actually turning stuff around quickly.
If I can just come back. I mean, I totally agree and appreciate that. I suppose I'm just asking for a more realistic target. So if you looked at those numbers and said it was at 10%, that we would expect at 10. If it starts to go beyond that, as a scrutiny, we would say, actually, do we need to ask questions here? But when the performance is so far away from the target, it's hard to make any judgment. Really, the only other one was just more a matter of information. I didn't realise there were conference booking facilities at Primrose myself. Obviously, it was built before I was on the council. I don't know whether, when we've talked about trying to re-engage community groups, trying to make sure community centres are full, whether there's actually an opportunity at some point to say these are all the community spaces available. Because often you get asked for them and you know the ones in your local area, but you don't know the ones beyond that. And I wouldn't have never thought to recommend that to anybody.
Just on that one, we'd love to take you on a tour, so you can have a look at them. The prior to COVID, the room was very popular and demand was building as well. We have actually used it whilst we've had some issues with other centres, most notably Tatton, because of the demolition. We've actually used it to accommodate some of the displaced community groups. And although it's managed locally in terms of by the Primrose staff, it's very much part of the sort of community centre family, and the booking procedures, etc., are the same.
Through you, Chair, I think that's quite a good point, though, that there are that many additional facilities these days. It might be good to rebrief members on all the facilities we have and what they can do, just because, you know, members should be aware of that kind of thing. So I'll be happy to do that.
I mean, how's that getting on? Are we nearly full?
Come to that, Chair, because there is, down the bottom, there is the, under projects, if Peter's finished his bit, I can run through the projects if you like, because there are 4 corporate strategy projects on there. One is Strawberry Fields, it's called here, Alker Lane. The site formerly known as Alker Lane is now Strawberry Fields. The update is a number of units have been potentially let because we're still in the throes of letting them. To be honest, most of the smaller units have got emerging tenants to take them. Some of the bigger units haven't, and what we've just been discussing recently is sort of a advertising and rebranding, because until you try and let these things, you're not quite sure how they're going to go. So we're not concerned, Mark, I don't think, about particularly letting the smaller units. The bigger units perhaps are more of an issue because the operators would perhaps want to own those units, and therefore what we're going to try and do is do a bit more targeted. Now we know where the gap is, we can actually focus on those people who might be interested in those units. There is interest, it's just not getting away as much as the smaller units. So it comes back a little bit to, and we had this conversation last night, I think, at a meeting either, was it when it was last night, which was last night? Night before was the wholly owned company. Obviously, I wasn't at the wholly owned company, so I was asking somebody about it, and there was an update went to that committee chair, that's why we discussed it. And what the councillor who'd been at that meeting said is, you know, it's a bit like with Market Walk, we stuck to our guns about what we wanted. We didn't just go for the cheapest dollar. And there's a balance, a trade-off to be done with that, and that was the discussion, I think, at the wholly owned company on Tuesday night.
So is it coming back now into profit? Because I think at the budget meeting it was saying that this year it's made a loss.
Sorry, I'm talking about Strawberry Meadows. Strawberry Fields, the Strawberry Fields building is 60-odd%, 70% full.
We've done an exercise with colleagues in finance, and it will break even for the first time, but it will exceed that actually. So where we're at there, the situation that was in place previously hasn't changed, in as much as there's huge demand for the fixed office units, but the concept of having the hot desks, number one is, in retrospect, there was too much space dedicated to that provision in the first instance, and the whole COVID and working from home thing has meant that model probably isn't sustainable at that level. So what we've been doing on an incremental basis is, on a phased approach, is reconfiguring the building and trying to find innovative ways to steal some of that communal hot desk space and create more fixed offices. And each time we've done that, we have let the offices. So it's going in the right direction. We've got we've managed to do that thus far without coming back to the council for any further money, because there was a residual pot in the capital for the project that we've been utilising. I think for the final phase, depending what it comes in at, we might have to come back for some more money. But again, that will be as an investment, because the rental income will pay for it in the longer term.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? I've just got one on the new Market Walk. They've just opened a new restaurant. Is it Luciana's? I haven't been here yet there myself. Is it now, are all the units now taken?
No. There is one unit left, Chair, which is the unit between Luciano's and the cinema. And the cinema entrance. So you've got the unit there, which is a bit of a funny unit because it's a small entranceway into a larger back area. Right. So we have had discussions with a number of operators who are interested in taking that space. And once we want to get Luciano's in and operating before we progressed it further, for two reasons. We didn't want too much going on at once, but also we thought that would help to dictate what we end up using that unit for. And we've had discussions again this week back to do we go for what we want, or do we go for who'll pay the money? So there is interest, for example, from a coffee shop operation for part of it. So do we need another coffee shop? Well, we'd perhaps rather go for something that we haven't got. We've got lots of coffee shops, so you know what I mean. But a coffee shop paying good money is a coffee shop paying good money. So so we could probably fill it tomorrow. What we've wanted to do, though, is to put the jigsaw together and they had this final unit away. It's a bit of a strange unit because it's a funny shape and it's got a lot of back space. And again, without breaking any confidences, I think some of the operators who just moved in recently have realised they need a bit more storage space because they're actually overtrading. So therefore, they might be interested in some of it to pay for some of it, which will make it a more regular shaped unit. So it was always going to be the interesting one because the way we configured everything else, we've given some of the other people exactly what they want on the grounds that who we wanted and they're paying a good amount of money for it.
So you're above 75% then now?
Oh yeah, what we on about? 80. Of the whole unit, including Marx's and everything, 90-something percent.
I don't know his percentage, but it's high.
It's 90-odd% because you've got the cinema, which is a huge unit. You've got Marx's, which is a big unit. So this is it's a bigger than it's not a small retail unit, but it's in the big scheme of things, it's quite a small area. And some of it was the previous sort of circulation space because we had looked at it being sort of back routes, but because we've not gone to smaller units, we've been able to keep that circulation to quite small areas. Although at the moment it's being used as
It's currently in use on a temporary basis for a group of local charitable organisations that are using it for storage for distribution of aid to Ukraine. And we've put some temporary power provision in for that purpose at the moment. They know that's a short-term let, as it were, licence, so it's not going to hold up any of the negotiations with the longer-term tenants.
So, I mean, on the Newmarket Walk, the people who are in there, are they all happy with the way footfall and everything else, really?
delirious. No, yeah, I think. I mean, obviously the cinema is having to get back to normal, so it's still in the throes of people returning to normal, but it's getting busier. You can see that from the car parking. Luciano's, like I said, are overtrading, I think, compared to where they thought they'd be. Escape, talking to Ian Kearney again, he's doing very well now, but obviously he's suffered massively through COVID because, you know, he was getting his bowling lanes closed, you know, because it was deemed to be a close proximity event. So it will take a long time to get over 2 years of problems, but Marks is traded massively well through lockdown. The sports shop, I think, and the fashion shop, they're doing all right. They're not complaining anyway. They're not coming back to get a rent reduction, which they would be if they weren't trading very well. So, but I think we are still seeing the return to normal to a certain extent.
So, just Chair, for the cinema, there's still the issue about the backlog of film releases as well that's working through, which, you know, they need that logjam to unlock in order to. So the good news is films are coming out. Don't bother with Batman if you're interested, by the way, it's boring. But that needs to work through. There's a backlog of releases.
Thank you.
So just going back, Chair, through you to the other projects, there's the Alka Lane land that says there is working through, and like I said before, is getting going in terms of lets. There is still more improvements to the town centre. I enjoyed very much the headline last week about our toilet block that won the award not being bog standard. That's my favourite line of the year so far. There's also the Bengal Street scheme as well that we're moving on with, and we're spending £1 million there in the next year because we have to. And then also Tatton extra care scheme, and we had problems with that because some of the where it's been developed, some of the issues they had around the fire and flooding and stuff that followed from that. But that is starting to come back on track. So we're more optimistic that that's going to run to the completion programme that we wanted it to, and will be opening through 2022 and 23 for the different phases that we've reported on previously. So I think there's a great level of confidence. Again, I'm following discussions earlier this week. So again, you know, we are aiming to get, going back to Councillor Riggott's point, to get the occupancy levels there as high as they are at Primrose Gardens, because we've proven the model works and there's a lot of space to fill up at Tatton on that residential care, and there's a big demand for it as well.
Yeah. Any questions on the project? There's again no mention about the Whittle surgery, which I understand is due to be opening in
next
the first
Wednesday.
week of April.
Next Wednesday.
Am I right?
No, the 17th.
17th? Oh, All right, right. Well, I was with Eric Bell yesterday. He said his wife's got an appointment on April 1st. So he assumed it was assumed not that she was going to be the first one in, but I assumed it was going to be open from the early April, that was all.
Well, I don't know, like me, you were driving past today, Councillor Walker, but the hoarding's gone down, hasn't it? So,
Well, this is painting white lines outside so it's all looking very smart and, you know, new bus shelters and everything else, really. So it's, I think people are looking forward to being open, really.
yeah, and it's been slightly frustrating because it was running very much to programme, and just towards the end it ran over, probably because of some issues that had happened earlier in the scheme. But again, I think it's looking quite well. Certainly.
So what about the Paris Community Centre? Is that complete?
Yeah, I think it's sort of tied in with the handover of the GP at the same time. Obviously, you'd have issues if one was open and one wasn't. So I think it's all set for the 17th, I think.
Yeah. Very good, very good. So, Mark, I have no further questions on this. Just for yourself, you've now been the director for the two councils, shared services. How are you finding it? Are you having to spend more time in South Ribble or more time in Chorley, or is South Ribble more demanding?
I'm spending time in both. So I was joking earlier. I came here tonight from informal cabinet at South Ribble. So no, it's split. I mean, what's been really beneficial actually is the whole forced hybrid working has helped immensely. If we were doing things completely in the old-fashioned way of turning up face-to-face to meetings, I'd be like a yo-yo, going backwards and forwards. But this move towards it's okay to have a meeting online, on Teams, etc., has been really helpful. We're finding that some of the challenges that we face in Chorley in terms of delivery are the same in South Ribble. I know there's ongoing discussions about what future phases of shared services might look like, yeah? There's definitely some services within my directorate which I feel are appropriate for sharing to address some of the issues that we've got in terms of recruitment and retention of staff and the general employment market. I'm thinking particularly about some of the technical staff on the estates and property side. The market is such that it's very difficult to recruit people. There's huge demand for them. So yeah, that's one of the interesting things. And again, I think what's of great benefit to South Ribble at the moment is the fact that Chorley was bold and innovative and delivered some of these major projects like the extra care facilities. South Ribble are a bit further behind, but they're getting the benefit of the experience that we've developed in Chorley in terms of developing those schemes, you know. So there's some definite benefits there that are being derived for the other party as well.
yeah, because they're doing Word and Hall. I mean, they've got the town centre to do and all that, and a lot of that capacity to do that will be stuff that, because we've got trained officers and ways of working and supply chain to do that work, which they've not had, and we didn't have 8-10 years ago. So, interestingly, myself and Councillor Foster attended the Unison AGM today at South Ribble. So obviously we sat there in front of our workforce being told how badly we'd done shared services in some places, because we have in some places. It's not been a perfect world, but we were honest enough to say, look, you know, we're doing this for the right reasons, and we are seeing benefits to the residents and the council taxpayers of both areas, even though a lot of members of staff have had to go through lots of changes. But then again, everybody's going through lots of changes at the minute because the way of working has changed, as Mark says. And I think the senior officers and directors have found it challenging at times, working over a bigger footprint and having to keep two organisations that have been quite different in the past, you know, working together. But, well, you know, it's not, I think it's what Paul Foster said, it's not perfect, but it's getting better in many ways and many places. And it's not a Chorley takeover. We heard that 5 times today as well. It's not a Chorley takeover, even though our teams parked all the vans like it was outside in a big long line. So it was like a Chorley takeover at West Paddock. But it's not. It's about working together for the benefit of both lots of residents. And generally we got a reasonable audience. You know, we weren't booed off with it that way. But what they did say is, you know, it's not perfect, and we agreed.
I think for my services as well, because we've not got formal sharing arrangements in place. When we talk about shared services, we generally talk about the formal sharing arrangements. There's a lot of informal exchange of knowledge that goes on. So, for instance, and this is what's been really useful, if there's something that needs doing in property and estates over here, if I'm saying, well, they've just done that last month over at South Ribble, don't reinvent the wheel, go and copy their homework. So there's a lot of that goes on as well, which is really beneficial in terms of making both organisations more efficient and not starting from scratch with pieces of work that our neighbours have done fairly recently themselves.
I mean, but basically, there's not a lot of projects from the Chorley side at the moment. Ahead is Bengal Street, finish of Alka Lane and Strawberry Meadows. But are there any more projects you're potentially going to bring to the council in the next few months?
Yes,
Yeah.
and we'll tell you what they are when we get to them, because they're not fully formed yet.
No.
But we are taking a little bit of a breath at the minute because we knew we had a number of larger projects like Tatton Gardens that has been quite challenging because we're fitting an awful lot into that site that we're coming to a head, and a little bit getting projects going takes a lot of effort, and also finishing them off takes a lot of effort. So we had a number last year that were in flight and were going. We were very conscious that this year we've got a lot to go, but we are now turning our mind to what next, and I think there's some exciting projects we'll be bringing forward, but I don't want to sort of, preempt and jump the gun. This should be coming out to everybody at the same time. But yeah, we can't stand still. We've got to keep moving forward. The question is what have we not got, and rather than just keep repeating the same tricks time and time again, because that's not going to work. But we still come back to the main things, John, which is the corporate priorities, which are about creating peak jobs. So we're creating workspace for people. That's important. Housing, again, that's one of the things, and accommodation for people, quality housing, and in the right places at the right cost and all that. That's important. And then on top of that, green development, I think, is also very important, which again, we state in the strategy, so there's nothing new. It's just where is it and what projects. And at any point in time, we've probably got, Bengal Street's a classic one of this. It'll get so far, and then the question will be, right, what do we then do? And there's some big discussions around that, like we said previously, about the leisure centre and things like that. So if you stick a few of those together, you're up to 15, 20 million quite quickly, which is quite a lot of effort for a district council our size. And we've also got partners, we've got an empty magistrates court sat over there, we've got a police station that's falling apart, we've got all kinds of things going on who want to remodel their accommodation because they're in a post-COVID world as well. So we have to have an idea about what we might want to do. We could do everything, but we'd fail if we tried to do everything. We've got to do the things that, and it's also then understanding what's going to get picked up by the private sector, because some of this stuff we do because others won't do it, because there's a gap. And therefore I am very interested on two things really. One is accommodation, particularly in the town centre, and this is something that Martin Broadman's raised before and others have. And then the other thing is the public estate, because despite being told by the government to work in one public estate manner, certainly the magistrates court have not done that, and there are others that we are saying you need to work with us, because otherwise you'll end up with your building becoming a derelict problem in our town centre or in the village or whatever it might be. And therefore I think we've got to intervene a little bit more robustly in some places. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Okay. The other consideration is around the availability of grant funding as well. So we've been incredibly successful in the past few years, actually attracted grant funding. So Strawberry Meadows is an example, Tatton Gardens as an example. We keep hearing lots of stuff about levelling up, but the government's only really just putting the meat on the bones, and they've obviously had some distractions with various things on that. But Gary and I had a meeting with the very senior civil servant today, actually, who's in charge of levelling up to discuss that and other matters. So although you won't see necessarily in the immediate future big, huge projects in terms of stuff coming out of the ground, like the Tatton Gardens of this world, etc., we are very much trying to align ourselves so that we are in a good position to access some of the major government funding that's becoming available. And that is very much around developing those relationships with government to ensure that we tick in the right boxes, but also getting a good understanding of the type of activity that's likely to be successful, which is the key challenge. So that's something that we're very conscious of at the moment.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions for Alistair and Peter? Mark? No? Okay, well, thank you very much, Mark, for attending this evening. If you want to stop, you can do, with pleasure, but if you've been to previous meetings today, so you can, and Alistair and Peter, if you want to depart, you can do. Right. Thank you. Right, we'll move on when we can find it to. Thank you very much. I'll turn this way now. Good evening. Thank you for being here. Can I ask you to tell us about the progress made on the business plans? Thank you. Are you doing it, Victoria? Or?
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. So this is an update on the delivery of the business plans for this year. So we're now reaching the end of the year, and our business planning process is starting again for next year now. So as you'll know, we have our corporate strategy which sets out our main priorities from a council perspective, and then based on that, each service within the council and each directorate will develop a business plan, and that includes their priority activity to be delivered over the year to support those corporate objectives. So as I said, this is a year-end position statement for our business plans. At point 9, you can see a summary of the current status, which indicates that at the moment 49% of projects are green, 11% are amber, 32% are complete, 5% are on hold, and 2% have not started. So of those projects, there is a graph there that kind of shows them in nice colours, just to display the services down the left-hand side axis, and then the progress in the chart. For the projects that are rated as amber, we've provided the reasons slightly further on in the report, and then just highlighting some of the achievements since the last report that we brought through this committee in, I think it was October. So a number of things that have been delivered since then, including the resident survey, action on climate change, the events programme, work around Astley Hall, activity delivered through the joint Chorley and South Ribble partnership, to look at how we work more sustainably with our partners, a new volunteering policy, and then, as we've just discussed, some of the improvements to the covered market and work in the town centre. So as we get to point 13, this is a bit of a description of the projects that are rated amber, so they're the ones that are potentially slightly off track, and you can see a list of projects there through the different directorates and the reasons from point 14, which are primarily at the moment still around, obviously it's a recovery year, so we are still experiencing challenges in some areas with capacity as we kind of deal with the end of business grants and things like that. ICT capacity, as we get new kind of service alignment and bring in new skills into the IT area, and then delivery of some of the major projects which have kind of been impacted by various external factors as well. So I think that's probably a high-level overview of all of the projects, and then there is an appendices which shows each of the projects within the plan, of which I think there are about 170, and their current status. Where projects are still to be completed, and they will be taken forward over the next, well, they're all due to complete by the end of March, or they will be taken forward into the new business plans for next year. Any that are currently on hold or haven't yet started will be evaluated, and we'll take a decision as to whether they need to now move forward or be resourced differently to make sure that they're prioritised. So happy to take any questions, or we can go away and get further information on any of the projects as you wish. Thank you.
Have we got any questions? Yeah, yes.
Thank you. I think some of the answer to my question was in the explanation behind the report, because it's the first time I've seen this, so I didn't realise it was the year-end report. So would we expect a year-end report to be... I would have expected a year-end report to have a lot more of a completion status than this currently shows, because either it would suggest that we were over-ambitious in what we think we could achieve this year, because if some of the projects need doing but they actually belong next year or the year after, that distorts the figures because it doesn't make the performance look as high as it is if what was realistic. And I wasn't quite sure how we changed some of the classifications, because some that were red last time, which was off track, are now blue, not started. But that's not immediately clear in the report that we've made that change or why we've made that change, but is that because it's not been delivered this year, so it's been re-reviewed?
So we're going through that review process now. I think at the beginning of the year when we set out our project intentions, we're very much looking at kind of assuming a normal year's delivery. But obviously as we go through the year, other things will kind of emerge, or we will be tasked with other priorities, whether it be, you know, further rounds of business grants or other major projects will take more time to deliver. So the business plan will flex and change, and service managers and directors will prioritise activities based on the resources that they've got available. In some cases, you may see reports come through to members that will say, we're going to need more resources if you want us to deliver this. In others, they may be deprioritised from a service perspective. So, for example, some of the I would consider lower level projects, perhaps around some process improvements or automation, it may be that the project manager said, actually, it's not an absolute priority that we deliver this year. Had we had the skills, the capacity and the time, we would have done it, but it's not a major issue if we take it forward next year. That's something that we can catch up on. It won't impact on our business or our performance fundamentally. So I think that's probably some of the reasons. In terms of the ones that are not started and have previously been reported red, I think we'll probably have to go back and just do a bit of a cross-check on those. So we monitor, of the 170 projects, we go out to the services and ask for an update on them twice a year. But we obviously monitor the corporate strategy projects, so those high-level ones, much more frequently. But we can go back and have a look at those and just quality assure and check that we've not missed anything in terms of any changes to ratings.
Yeah.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I understand a lot of that. I suppose my only ask would be then, if this is the year-end report, is it possible to have a summary, or even at the stage of ones? It's the ones that change that I'm trying to look at, because it's quite a large piece of work to look through each one individually as a councillor from one report to the next to see what's changed. And I understand that we provide a report on those that are off track, and that makes sense, but the ones that have changed, and it's understanding why, because there's some that were read last time that are now complete. And while that's great, it also makes me question that going from being severely off track, the worst rating, to being done in 3 months' time. I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to assess that from a scrutiny perspective of, it seems a very large change. I don't know whether it's just maybe a bit more clarity or commentary around some of the reporting, because it would be helpful if some of the ones that were maybe have been deprioritised because they didn't have significant outcomes, if that was laid out in there, so we could see that, because we want to scrutinise and look at the things that are most valuable, and the biggest impact on change is not a very small thing. That is actually 6 reports when we're asking you why you're doing all these, and we're going to make tiny changes, I suppose.
Yes, absolutely. We can do that for you, and provide that narrative around why those ratings have changed. I suppose, for an example, one that was rated red last year was the estates and property workflow management using iDocs as main management software. It may be that we've commissioned some consultancy to come in and do that over a very short period of time, and now that's been delivered. So we'll provide that narrative for you next time.
Yeah, I can't see it. On item 19, paragraph 19, all the risks there, A, B, C, D, all mentioning lack of staff. Are you recruiting at the moment, or is that held up, or what?
Yes, we are. I think there's a number of factors in that. Obviously, we've had some significant service reviews, and when we do that work, we always recruit internally for any vacancies first, so that we can give staff and existing staff a development opportunity should they wish to progress into a different role. So that does often kind of slow down the process of getting to the open market. But it's important that we do that work first to look for kind of any internal candidates and make sure that we're prioritising our own staff. And then I suppose, as we probably alluded to in a number of meetings, we are in a very challenging labour market at the moment in terms of key skills and being able to access those. So we have changed the way that we recruit and the way that we advertise roles. So previously we did a lot through our in-house systems. We've now gone to a much bigger network. So we use a new recruitment platform that gives us a much wider reach in terms of prospective candidates for roles, and that's working really well. So for example, one role that we advertised a few months ago and only got 7 applications, we used our new platform and got nearly 80, which gives us a much kind of broader range to go at, and that's what we need really. So we are changing the way that we do things and looking to improve. And then with a more medium-term view, we're also going to be looking at developing what's going to be a people strategy, and that will set out our future workforce development plan and our succession plans, so that in a sense we're planning as best we can to avoid these gaps in skills in future by looking at how we can either target particular markets or we can grow our own in-house through apprenticeships or graduate programmes, which is typically where we've seen the best outcome. So there's a number of things that we're doing to address some of those skills gaps at the moment.
And on that recruiting, ICT seems to be the other big problem. Is that being sorted as well? Is it the new equipment or what?
Yes, so the IT service review to bring those two together is now complete. A lot of the benefits that we've seen of that initial work have been very much in the back office, where it's been about getting kind of our unseen systems into a much better state and condition, and that's meant that when things have happened over the last few months, we've been able to address those. So where there's been security threats and things like that, we've been in a much better position because all that work in the background has been done. But that also means now that we need to turn our attention to some of the front-end capacity and the technical support that we have across the organisation. So we're doing that work to recruit key skills in IT, and also to kind of fast-track some of the IT delivery plan to make sure that we're getting through that work more quickly and accelerating some of those elements now. So yes, I think it's fair to say there have been challenges in that area. But we are now getting back on track with those with a really kind of a dedicated plan to move that forward with lots of monitoring right across the organisation, and particularly at senior management team.
Okay, thanks for that. Any further questions, anybody? No questions? Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. Safe journey home, everybody. And thank you, everybody, for your support this last year. It's been a difficult year with half the year has been with COVID, and we're now getting back to normal, really. I hope next year we can have these meetings in committee room too. It's, I just feel it better with a small committee to be in a small room. But that's up to the directors to decide whether that's feasible or not. We'll have to see. But anyway,